Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio Cortez appeared on the State of the Union with Jake Tapper yesterday, and I want to play one of the moments for you because she addresses the core of the argument that people often deploy in service of Donald Trump, and it relies on a very thoughtless and vague analysis of the current state of things. We hear MAGA say super often that Trump's being treated so poorly and clearly unfairly, evidenced by the sheer number of cases being brought against him. That's sort of how the argument goes. Clearly, he has to be getting targeted in unfair ways because look at how many things are being brought against him. And here was AOC's response to that talking point.
What do you say to an independent voter, an average voter, who looks at what's going on with Donald Trump? You have his assets might be seized tomorrow. You also have the hush money case from the the district attorney, Alvin Bragg of New York. You also have the Georgia case about election interference. You also have the special counsel investigation on election interference. You also have the classified documents case down in Florida. That's 5 cases. And to a voter, what do you say to a voter who says, well, that doesn't look like he's being treated equally before the law? That looks like somebody that the government is going after.
Has there ever been a president, Republican or Democrat, that has been subject to this level of criminal charges, indictments, and investigations? This is not about party. This is not about politics. This is about corruption and criminality. We're talking about an individual who ordered essentially a terrorist attack on the Capitol of the United States in order to retain power. That is not about being a Republican. It is not about being a Democrat. It's about being an unethical and individual who is subject and prone to criminality. And unfortunately, this is the state that we're in. And I actually think that the fact that it's happening in so many places and so many jurisdictions cuts in the face of that. This is not just New York. This is Georgia. This is federal courts as well.
And that's exactly it. It is unprecedented what's taking place. But the unprecedented fact that a former president's being prosecuted, or that a former president's being prosecuted with this many different cases, or just your awe of how many cases there are that are being brought against Trump, is only proof of the unprecedented and stunning nature of his potential criminality, right? It's his actions prompting all of this. And so it's interesting the party of personal responsibility and law and order all of a sudden doesn't think Trump should take any personal responsibility and doesn't believe in law and order clearly. Again, because it's all become, no, in some way this has to be a huge conspiracy to take him down. And I've gone to Trump rallies, as y'all know, so many times and posed this very question to people. Do you really think, Occam's razor, do you really think it more likely that all of this is some grand historic conspiracy to take down Trump, which would include hundreds of people, grand jurors, just regular citizens sitting on those grand juries approving these indictments, and prosecutor after prosecutor and judges, and all of it is the conspiracy to take him down? Or he, much simpler explanation, just did the things. Or enough evidence has been brought forward that it seems like he did the things that violated the law. And so thus indictments are justified. We'll see how it plays out in court. But no, somehow minds can be bended into pretzels to believe that actually Trump did nothing wrong and this is all some big witch hunt.
I need you to admit it's not crazy to go, it's probably more likely that there's not the largest conspiracy in the history, and you don't even listen to my sentences. Come on. In the history of the world, where every single judge, every single grand jury juror, every single prosecutor, every single person involved, every witness who's testified against Trump or who's going to and has already been interviewed and all the stuff we're learning, all of that's fabricated. Or the one guy who has every interest in the world in lying to protect himself is the one guy lying. That's a lot simpler.
Here, let's go back to that 2020 election. And I saw this. Now, Milwaukee, they actually came up with more votes than the entire population of these pre-voting districts.
You need to check where you're
because you've been brainwashed with this hatred.
I'm just full of love.
Really unfortunate. Now, I said that I have something else important, and that is that I really want to make an effort going into this election to discuss and organize around, and so I hope you all will join me in this, races other than just for the White House, definitely the White House, but then things in addition to that, because I know for certain we're going to be talking constantly about the presidential race, and I'll do fundraising efforts for that and everything. But we got to make sure we don't forget about doing the same for these crucial Senate races and House races, because they're so important as well. And to that end, of course, I interviewed Colin Allred, who's hopefully going to defeat Ted Cruz in Texas. We'll be talking a lot more about him. I can guarantee you there are some other interviews we're working on and efforts getting involved, helping campaigns. But one of the races I told you about a few weeks ago was the Senate race in Wisconsin. The current Democratic Senator Tammy Baldwin is defending her seat there. And to maintain the majority in the Senate, as I told you last time we talked about this, Democrats need Tammy Baldwin to win her reelection bid. So I wanted to circle back to that, remind you of what's going on there, and encourage you to support her campaign if you can. I'll put the link to donate in the description of this video and for our podcast listeners. So to remind you, the person challenging Tammy Baldwin is Eric Hovde, and he's another one of these sort of rich guys self-funding his campaign. Seems a little out of touch. And we've seen a lot of these sorts of characters in Republican politics recently. And just to remind you of the contrast between Tammy Baldwin in the Senate and the potential of Eric Hovde in the Senate, as we see in so many of these cases, it just could not be more stark. As an example, Tammy Baldwin is one of the leading sponsors of the Women's Health Protection Act, which would codify Roe v. Wade into federal law, whereas Hovde is anti-choice. Not to mention democracy being on the ballot in this election at large, Medicare and Social Security, protecting and expanding the Affordable Care Act. And the thing that really gets me out of bed, gets me excited, is yes, averting the crisis of Trumpism and defeating the MAGA Republican Party wherever we possibly can, but also what we're voting for. As I say so often, you have your against column, lots of reasons in that against column, but you have a for column that's really significant and people need to make sure to emphasize. So we can get more of the policies like the historic ones that were signed into law by Joe Biden when Democrats had a majority in the House, something we talk about rather often. And again, the contrast between the first 2 years of Biden's presidency when Democrats had a majority in the House and of course the Senate versus Republicans taking over majority in the House and progress in many ways, legislatively at least, screeching to a halt. So just imagine if Republicans were able to control the Senate as well. It would be a total disaster. So I cannot express to you enough, with that being said, how important this race is. And of course, I'll be talking about the other important ones as we get closer to the election. And so I'm hoping to use my platform to do a little fundraising. Why not? Again, you can go to the link in the description of this video or for our podcast listeners. Thank you all so much. If you can give, if you can't, don't. Much love either way. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, click the alert bell, the like button, and become a member at lukebeasleyshow.com/membership.